Hello everyone, and thank you all so much for coming today. I am Hashimoto Yoshinaga, and I am a third-year student at International Christian University. And alongside my best friend Samin, we founded our university's very first wrestling club when I was in my freshman year. Together, we built an athletic community of over 75 members, with members ranging from more than 12 different countries. We run practices for both casual fitness lovers and also serious competitive athletes. We went from not even existing just 2.5 years ago to being able to win multiple medals at major intercollegiate wrestling competitions against universities with decades of history above us, as well as being recognized as an official wrestling team by the Japanese Wrestling Federation. Now, after hearing that, you might be thinking a couple of things, right? Perhaps maybe he was a, captain of his high school wrestling team, or perhaps he had some experience leading a student club of some sorts. And those are all very valid assumptions. But in reality, when this team was built just 2.5 years ago, I had absolutely zero experience with the sport of wrestling. Absolutely zero. You see, I didn't even know the rules of the sport. Not to mention, I've never even stepped onto a wrestling mat before. It's pretty crazy, right? Now, before I move on with this talk, let me ask you all a simple question. What makes a good leader? Right? Some people say it might be the expertise, the technical side. Maybe some people say, no, it's the human side, right? The compassion, the understanding. For me, I've always thought that a good leader is typically the person with the most experience and the most competence, right? The person who most of the time knows most of the answers, and that one person who everyone can just rely on. But what happens if you become a leader and you don't have any of the answers? What happens when you're thrown into a situation where everyone's looking at you for guidance, but you don't have anything figured out? As you can probably tell, it's probably a very uncomfortable situation, because that is where I found myself 2.5 years ago when I first built this team. And in this talk, I will explain how I turned that uncertainty into one of the best decisions of my life. I will structure this talk in 3 parts. First, I will talk about why and the how, right? Why did I even choose to pursue this? And how did I even get started? Second, I will talk about the challenges, right? The times when I had no idea what I was doing, and the times when things felt like they're about to fall apart. Lastly, I will talk about how I overcame those challenges, and most importantly, what I learned throughout this whole journey. So, why wrestling, right? Why choose to build a team for a sport I didn't even know the rules of? And that's a very good question. And the answer to that question lies when I was in my middle and high school years, where I would spend a lot of my time practicing and training in combat sports. Mainly I would train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, mixed martial arts, and sometimes kickboxing, which, by the way, are very different sports from wrestling. And throughout my years of training, I realized that many of the toughest fighters that I've encountered all surprisingly had a background in wrestling. Not to mention, many of my favorite professional fighters all had the same background as well. And so, simply put, I had a strong admiration for wrestlers and the sport of wrestling, and I just wished I could be as strong and as athletic as they were. I'm sure this is a familiar feeling for many of you as well, right? This strong feeling of admiration and a desire to achieve something or become someone. But even though I had this burning motivation to wrestle, unfortunately, my university did not offer a wrestling team. And so after a bit of thinking, for me, the only rational thing I could come up with was to make one myself. And so the first thing I did was simple. I started looking. Right? I looked for anyone who has ever wrestled before, or anyone who has even remotely interested in taking on this challenge with me, because I knew that this wasn't something I could just do alone. I asked around on campus, I searched on social media, and after weeks of scavenging, I finally found Samin. It's my best friend Samin right there, the tall, handsome guy next to me. And he had some wrestling experience back in high school. And after finding him, I texted him on social media, and we decided to meet in person. And it was to nobody's surprise, it was very easy finding him on campus with his head sticking out on top of everyone. And so as nervous as I was, I walked up to him while he was talking with 3 of his friends, and I introduced myself. And even though it was the very first time meeting him, he greeted me with the biggest smile and an enthusiasm I will never forget. We instantly clicked through our shared love and passion for combat sports and our ambition to create something meaningful. And after just a bit of talking, he was completely on board with the whole project. And that's how it started. I still remember our very first meeting we had together, where he looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Yoshi, we are going to make the best club ICU has ever seen before." And that's how it started. We first started with just the 2 of us, where we would meet up after classes, and he would teach me the rules and the point system and how the sport even worked. He even taught me the fundamental techniques of wrestling. And after just about a month of these private lessons, we decided it was time to recruit new members to practice with. And even though he was clearly the one with more experience and not to mention more charisma, I became the supposed leader of the practices because he was a very busy 3rd-year student, and I was a bored freshman looking for something to do. And so with that, I became the leader of the wrestling team. When I first took on this challenge, I had 2 main doubts: the external and the internal. You see, the external doubt was that I was worried that no one would even come to practice in the first place, right? Because especially in Japan, wrestling is a sport that's popularity had steadily been decreasing for the past 10 years. Not to mention, there's been a stigma behind the sport about it being very rough and not very beginner-friendly. But through Samin's incredible recruiting skills and his enthusiasm for the sport, surprisingly, our first practice was a packed full house. So with that doubt swept out of the way, to be honest, my main doubt was the internal. You see, as I saw everyone coming in for practice, stretching, talking, I was sat in the corner, and I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. Because I knew I didn't belong here. I had never experienced a real wrestling practice in my life, and I had no idea how to lead a team. I was so scared that people would see me as an imposter or a poser. And I was so worried that people would just stop coming because I was a beginner. It was a crushing feeling, knowing that I didn't belong in a team that I built myself. So, what did I do? Right? How did I lead the team as an inexperienced leader? For that, I focused on 2 main things: transparency and curiosity. First, I was very transparent and honest about my inexperience. From day 1, I told everyone, hey, I am not an expert. I'm here to learn alongside you guys. I also made sure people knew that, hey, I'm not a mentor or a coach of any kind. I'm just a leader that provides the environment where we can grow and learn together. And through that approach, I didn't need to be or act like an expert. And in addition to that, it had the added benefit of being able to relate more with the beginners and being able to understand their struggles firsthand. We took every opportunity to learn from everyone. Right? Because I was not an expert, I needed the expertise of other people as well, especially my members. And so some members had extensive background in judo. Some members were really good at weightlifting. And so some practices, I would ask the judo specialist to come up and teach for us, where we would learn the techniques and discuss how we could implement those judo techniques in our wrestling. Sometimes we would go to the weight room and ask the weightlifting specialist to teach us how to properly do certain exercises. And through that, it not only elevated us technically, but it also had the added benefit of making each and every member feel seen and appreciated. Next, I became the fastest, most curious, and most enthusiastic learner of the team. I thought, hey, if I couldn't be the most skilled wrestler, I would be the most obsessed learner. Right? I did everything I could to improve. I would watch countless videos of, technique explanations. I would ask countless questions. And after every practices, I would follow up with each member, asking how they felt about the practices so I could improve the level of training. You see, the legend Kobe Bryant is very famous for asking tons of questions and being constantly curious. And through this approach of curiosity, surprisingly, people didn't stop coming or treat me with less respect because I was a beginner. Interestingly, they saw firsthand how enthusiastic I was towards the sport. And it created a chain reaction where other members also started taking initiative of their learning and became curious about the sport. Simon helped me greatly with this whole process, where he would regularly take me to his high school wrestling practice for me to experience what an actual wrestling practice was like. Right there, I would learn how the members acted, right? How the coaches facilitated the practices. I would learn how the coaches used words of criticism and used words of encouragement to get better results from the members. I also learned from the beginners as well. Well, obviously, I was a beginner too, but the people who were more inexperienced than me, because sometimes they would find small details I might have missed. And so through this whole process of curiosity, it not only made me, or not only made the whole team active in the learning, it made me very at ease at being a beginner, because it was actually my strength. So, what did I learn from this whole process? Obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the story of ICU wrestling. But through this beginning process, I learned many new things, especially the first question here: what makes a good leader? You see, as I mentioned, I've always thought that a good leader is a person with the most experience and competence. But through 2.5 years of building this team, I realized something completely different. You see, a good leader isn't always the person who has all of the answers. But a good leader is always the person who is most obsessed with finding those answers. In addition to leadership, I learned many unexpected life lessons. One that stood out to me the very most was how many of the time people fail before they even start. You see, starting for many people is the most difficult part. But once you have the vision, once you have the momentum, many of the problems just become an opportunity for growth rather than a wall that stops you. You see, as Einstein continuously mentioned, where there is a will, there is a way. And I fully believe that to be true. And so if there's anything to take away from this talk, please let it be this. Don't wait until you feel ready or qualified to start something. Embrace the uncertainty. Embrace the uncertainty, step into the fog, and start walking. Because the moment you begin, even awkwardly, even blindly, you start to open doors that could have stayed locked your entire life. So, move first, grow second. Move first, grow second. Because that is how this team started, and I fully believe that this is how most meaningful journeys start. Thank you.